Got some folks coming on. We're gonna get ready to go live. Are we live right now?
We're live now.
Okay. All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. We are glad to be kicking off our Community Advisory Group meeting. This is our second meeting in March as we are increasing the number of meetings that we have with some big milestones ahead of us. With that, I'm hoping that we can get started with sharing the slides and reviewing the closed caption. But before we do that, maybe our co-chair, Mr. Ed Washington, might want to do a bit of a welcome.
Can you all hear me okay? All right, good. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so very much. You know, we're getting into additional time at the meeting. So we appreciate all of you being here today and taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy schedule for all of you. And I'm sure you're all in different places. I just happen to be up in the San Juans, one of these islands up here. It's a big one and it's beautiful. Went out to see some whales yesterday, but didn't see any. But I'm still here today and looking forward to hearing from all of you this evening and your participation in whatever way it's called upon. And really to thank you all again for your continued dedication and the support that you give this very, very worthwhile project. So that's all I have to say, unless you're going to call on somebody else.
Thank you, Ed. My partner in all things, IBR, is not able to make it today. So Johnell Bell won't be co-facilitating with me, but between Ed and Lynn and Jason and I think we'll be able to make it through our time together. As you know, this is the Community Advisory Group meeting, March 24th. We want to run through our typical closed captioning protocols and just review how to access closed captions in both English and Spanish. English captions are available within Zoom and YouTube, and users can follow the link to view both English and Spanish captions in a separate browser window. Next slide. If you are in the Zoom room and you'd like to access closed captions, there is a CC icon on the lower right-hand side of your Zoom menu, and we encourage you to just click on that and you'll be able to read the closed captions. We have shared this before that ASL is a part of our commitment to equity. I'm not seeing the ASL interpreter on.
I don't see them either, Lisa.
Okay, we typically have ASL interpretation. It doesn't look as though we have ASL on right now. If you are in need of ASL interpretation, if you could reach out to Brent or Jason and let us know. But at this point, let's move to the next slide. Our webinar participation tips. We very much appreciate each of you being here. It's nice to see those that have turned on their cameras, and the smiles and the sunshine outside is a good way to kind of end our Thursday afternoon, evening. We are asking for you to join by phone or computer, but not both. We would love to see you on video if you're in a space where you can do that. We'd like for you to keep your audio on mute when not speaking. And of course, if you have any technical difficulties, we have quite a set of program staff members here to support you. And the number you can reach is 360-329-6744 to be able to speak with a program member that can help. Public input. There'll be an opportunity to provide brief public input later in the meeting. We anticipate that will be around 5:45 tonight. To dial in by phone, we ask that you dial 1-669-900-6833. The meeting ID is 993-5455-6043, passcode 674-674-942. We will repeat all of these numbers as we get closer to the time period where we'll open public comment, but we do encourage the public to communicate directly with our community advisory group. And any correspondence that the community advisory group receives, we send it on to the group so that they have a chance to be able to review it prior to our meeting. If you have public comment that you haven't already sent but would like to send public comment, we invite you to do so via info@interstatebridge.org and typing in the words CAG Public Comment in the subject line. We also are more than happy to answer the phone, take a message, call you back. We just want to make sure that if there is something that you want this community advisory group to read, to see, or to hear, that we are providing that to them directly. We try to really encourage a sense of member commitments to one another. We go through these at the beginning of each meeting. I really appreciate that there was some leaning forward at our last meeting and participation and sharing of your input. And then there was also some leaning back. So if you choose to be someone that has questions and wants to share some thoughts, we ask that you maybe allow for others to do so. And if you tend to be someone who leans back and waits, we ask you to lean forward and to share your input. We also try to create enough space so that we are in small groups where you're able to share your input, and also create spaces in this large arena to be able to share your feedback. We'd like to put relationships first, stay focused on our common goal, notice the power dynamics in the room, create a space for multiple truths and norms, be kind and brave. We want to practice examining racially biased systems and processes, and we want to look for learning. Our meeting agenda for today, we have a full agenda. We will have a program update from our program administrator, Greg Johnson. We will be able to talk a little bit about and reflect some of the feedback that we received at our last meeting. And then we're going to dive into Hayden Island and Marine Drive. We want to share the community engagement feedback specific to this topic. We will have a technical presentation by our engineering team, and then we will have a breakout session where we're interested in hearing your thoughts. We'll do a report out, and then we'll open up for public comment. So our focus today is really on Hayden Island and Marine Drive, but before we dive into kind of a new component of the modified LPA, we really want to be able to reflect what we heard at our last discussion around transit. And with that, I think it is time for Greg to be able to share a bit of our overall program update now.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be in the virtual room with you on a beautiful sunny Northwest day. So this is, once again, you've heard me say this ad nauseum, but it's been just a busy, busy time. And we have meetings and we are stretching folks, and we recognize that. So I apologize in advance for the number of meetings that are coming up. But these meetings are key critical for having voices heard on this program. So I want to talk to you about, we've had 2 key meetings where information was passed along and shared with our executive steering group, as well as our bi-state legislative group. So let me start with our executive steering group. So that was last week. And that group, as you know, consists of the principals from the 10 partner agencies. So we talked to them about the transit analysis that we have been doing. We shared with them the same information that we shared with you on transit, and we once again took their input and concerns. We did not get to the Hayden Island because there was a large discussion on what we thought was a mundane issue, but it turned out to be a little more complex. And that issue was which entity, either WashDOT or ODOT, would run the tolling operation. So that's a base decision that had to be made so we could start working with the Office of Urban Mobility in Oregon to start looking at contracting for tolling services here in this area. So it was decided that Oregon DOT would be the lead agency, but this is not a decision on tolling itself or on pricing or any of the policies related to that. This was just merely who would be responsible for erecting the gantries, connecting and manning a back room via a contract. So, but anyway, that was a very robust discussion, but it did not allow us to talk to the ESG about Hayden Island and Marine Drive, which we will be getting to at their next session along with auxiliary lanes. So we also had a discussion with Bi-State, and they also expressed concerns about the tolling decision, which is, once again, it was a binary choice between ODOT and WashDOT, and because the bulk of the tolling will be here in the Portland, Vancouver area, it was decided that ODOT would take that lead. So anyway, it's been a busy week with Bi-State just happening yesterday. So we talked to them extensively about transit and the transit analysis that has gone on and what the data is informing us. There was not a final recommendation yet to either of these bodies. That recommendation will be coming out towards the end of April, probably the 20th or 21st. We will be talking back to Bi-State and the executive steering group to give them the team's technical recommendations for what we feel are the technical merits of the three major questions in front of us: the number of lanes across the bridge, meaning the number of auxiliary lanes, the configuration of Hayden Island and Marine Drive, what that looks like, and finally the mode of high capacity transit. And we also will be looking at what the final transit termini as well as station locations. So this is a, once again, key meeting that will be towards the end of April. And then we will be meeting with this group to give you the comprehensive layout of these three major decisions, as well as with the equity advisory group. And all of this happens before we go to boards and councils to hear their input. So if we could pull up that slide number 10. So this is our graphical representation. Now this talks about the process for purpose and need and community visions and values, but this is the same spinning wheel process of which we will be taking input on these recommendations going forward. So you will see this wheel, it's already spinning on what we have found so far to date, but towards the end of April, we will be putting that out in front of these groups, including yourselves, to once again answer questions, take feedback, and have this cycle spin. And we will be taking input from the Bi-State legislative group, and the cycle will spin again. We will be going to boards and councils. The cycle will spin again, and eventually we will take all of this feedback and refine our recommendation and move it forward to the ESG in late July and move it to the Bi-State legislative group at the end of July. So we have and part of the legislation that many of you have heard about, the Move Washington Ahead legislation, where the legislature has pledged $1 billion for the construction of this project. Now, it is yet to be signed by the governor, so we are waiting for that key important step to happen. But once again, that lines us up to be able to start putting forward grant applications in the Federal Transit Administration to start securing what the funding of this program will look like. So our decisions getting to this modified locally preferred alternative in this time frame that we have set out is tremendously important. Once again, we don't want to miss any funding opportunities. One thing I want to clarify for folks, this is not the end of the public process. This just takes us into the next step of NEPA, which is a supplemental environmental impact statement. And for those who don't know, this is a very public intensive process. We will still be meeting with you guys, the CAG, EAG, ESG, and bi-state during this very public time frame. But this allows us to take a scenario into and have it tested through the program and do a deeper dive on our recommendations for what this program should look like. So this is going to be, once again, a very, very intensive time period. I want to also talk to you about, we had a great visit to Washington, D.C. At the beginning of March, where we talked to the U.S. Department of Transportation on strategies. And the good part is that they are tremendously well aware of this program. The Federal Transit Administration Administrator, Nuria Fernandez, actually was on the bridge for a tour last fall. So she understands the problems that we face here in this region. Federal Highway Administration is well versed on this project. So we are in good standing and they have an understanding of the problems that we are facing down here. And they gave us some good strategies to talk about how we can apply and maximize federal funding on this program. So once again, busy time. We have a meeting next week with our federal partners to start sharing what we are finding. So they will be up to speed along with the other groups giving us input. So it is a tremendously busy time. But I will take any questions or concerns we have before we jump into the meat of the discussion on Hayden Island and a review of the transit look that we had the last time with this group. So Lisa, I'll ask you to facilitate any questions that the group may have.
I'm not seeing any. Oh, there we go. Robin.
Greg, is there a reason why the governor hasn't signed it yet, Governor Inslee? And when do you expect him to sign that legislation?
We think that his signature is imminent. We have not heard of any concerns with the governor and this legislation. So we think that is coming in the very, very near future. So we're hoping that it can be this week, but we don't know. Folks operate in their own time, but we have not heard of any concerns regarding the legislation that would prevent the governor from endorsing and signing.
Thank you.
Other questions for Greg? Easy group today.
So I'm going to be on for a while, and then I have to leave. I have to catch a plane, so I will try and listen in to most of the conversation. If questions come up further and I'm still on, I will be more than happy to answer any questions the group may have. So thank you.
Greg, before you leave, I thought it might be helpful to just share with the group. Our plan at this point is to ask if the community advisory group would be open to meeting for 3 hours in the 2 meetings that we have scheduled in April. We know this is a big lift. We also are really hoping to be able to provide enough space to share information, allow you to process what information we've shared with you so that you can provide meaningful feedback. So our plan at this point, which we were going to cover towards the end of this meeting, but I'd love for Greg to be on to be able to help if he has any other insight to add. But our plan at this point is on the 14th of April to be able to share with you the presentation and the materials around aux lanes, which are not through lanes, those are auxiliary lanes, and to be able to also share with you the winnowing down of the transit options. So we shared at our last meeting, the meeting before, 2 meetings ago, all of the different transit options that the program is analyzing and assessing. That's being narrowed down as we get closer to providing this modified LPA recommendation by the program. So 2 really big topics on the 14th of April, which is why we're asking if you'd be willing to meet for another hour. After the community advisory group on the 14th, as Greg mentioned, we have other groups by state legislative committee, ESG, that will also be meeting, and they'll start to see what that packaged recommendation from the program on the locally preferred alternative is looking like. On the 28th, the community advisory group will be able to see that, and we'll be looking for your feedback. So it's really important that we have enough time with you to not only provide information and present that, but also be able to listen to your feedback, and that there's space between some meetings so that you can think about what you heard and then follow up with any questions. So Greg, was there any other insight that you might want to share relative to kind of our schedule in April and what we're asking of the CAG?
No, Lisa, I think this is, you phrased it well. This is just a tremendously important and busy time. And we know we have a lot of information coming to the groups. So we want to make sure that we have enough time to have a full conversation with you rather than rushing through and having to stop conversation because of the clock. So that's what we're looking for. And we know that, okay, if we finish early, we'll let everybody go. But right now, this is a key critical time for your voice to be heard and reflected in the comments. And we know that both Lynn Valenter and Ed Washington, who sit on the executive steering group, need to hear so they can take your sentiments back to that executive steering group for that report out. So yes, this is tremendously important, and we would hope you would forgive us for asking for more of your time, but this is tremendously important.
Thank you, Greg. I know, Sam, you have your hand up, and Jasmine, you do as well. So why don't we start with Sam?
Yeah, just real quick. No apology needed. I support the 3 hours. The only request I have is that we have a break in between, break in the middle.
We can make that happen. Thanks,
Thank
Sam.
you, Sam. Jasmine?
Well, I was also thinking along the same lines as Sam, but I wasn't going to say it. So thanks for saying it, Sam. My question was just, do we know if we'd be tagging on the hour at the end or the beginning? And then my request is, you all have been really great about sending out information ahead of time. Is there a possibility that for those meetings, could we get like a few like really like bold like bullet points of like some things that you really want to key into in preparation for the meeting, so we can also move it along as efficiently as possible?
Yeah, we can try and capsulize information and create those important bullets that folks need to grasp and kind of make that a cover sheet to other information that's provided. So that's a great idea. Once again, we want you to be able to get to the meat of this thing, and having some bulleted things is probably the smartest, best way to do it.
Yeah, great comment, Jasmine. As far as the logistics of when we would add that extra hour, I think at this point, we would be open to hear what this group may prefer. Given many of you work 8 to 5, we were leaning into an extra hour towards the evening into the 7 o'clock hour. But we would be open to hear if we really want to try and make this work so that we have as many of you attend as possible. Tom Hickey has his hand up.
Personally, I have a meeting that follows this one that I agreed today to take the chairmanship of. So we'll find it very hard to attend a meeting that continues on past 6 o'clock.
Okay, appreciate that feedback, Tom. I think at this point, what we'll try to do is reach out to CAG members. We encourage you to please respond when Jason asks for input on the time, and we might be able to do a little bit earlier and a little bit later to try and accommodate as many folks as possible. Again, to echo Greg's comments, we want to make this work as much as we can. We know that we're asking a lot, and we hope that really being able to spend the 6 hours together in April will allow us to perhaps have a little time off this summer. So we're just asking for a little bit more in April to get us ready to move through the environmental process.
And one thing, Lisa, I think we can offer, if folks can't stay for the entirety, if they have the information, they've read it and they have some questions, they can submit their questions to us, and we can provide answers to them, read it so the entire group hears the question and provide answers as we go through it. So.
Absolutely. If I don't see any other hands at this point, then we'll go ahead and pivot into reflecting what we heard at our last meeting. I appreciate you weighing in here, Greg, as it relates to some of the schedule pieces. I think it's helpful to have you on for that piece. So, all right, transit feedback. So just to bring everyone's back up to speed, we did spend quite a bit of time in our last CAG meeting talking specifically about the presentation that was given on the transit investments. We had 4 different breakout sessions, lots of folks taking notes, and what we wanted to just kind of summarize here is some of those themes, kind of the top comments that we heard in those breakout sessions. And then I want to open it up to see, did we miss some key comments that really summarize the conversation that you had in your small breakout session? We are really wanting to spend the time to make sure that we capture this correctly. It is the information that Lynn and Ed will continue to take back to the executive steering group table. So with that, if you could move to the next slide. 2 areas where we heard some feedback were around the funding, tolling program, federal funds, and how those federal funds would be utilized if there would be strings to federal funding, and how the program can be transparent about what that might be. The need for future generations to not be burdened with the cost of the bridge. Under the kind of main heading of high capacity transit, single seat rides and efficiency was part of the values that were discussed. Reliability, light rail into Vancouver as a priority, a hybrid light rail and bus system as a value should be considered. Next slide. Other key themes, congestion relief is a top priority. Decisions need to be informed by data, and data needs to be shared and transparent. Bicycle and active transportation and multiple modes to cross the river are important. Paying attention to climate change and protecting and honoring cultural history, a focus on the bi-state cooperation, the need for a seismically safe bridge, equity considerations for transit modes and access, and the bridge just needs to be replaced. I think the infamous quote by Sam Kim, you know, the best bridge is the bridge that gets built, is often used within the program. I think some of the key themes that we heard are in those 2 slides, but I also wanted to mention that when we do receive questions that come in by CAG members, we also want to share those questions because we think that they may be questions that you might have, and we're working on following up with the data to respond. So 2 questions came in after this presentation. One was relative to understanding data around comparable trip times for the various modes. And I know that's part of what's being analyzed, but it's not ready at this point. And the second is any sort of crime data related to light rail transit routes. That's been a question that actually has been asked of the program by several different kind of members at our bi-state, and we don't as a program necessarily have that information, but we have worked with TriMet and with CTRAN to be able to at least provide some information. So we're working on responding to both of those questions as it relates to how that conversation in those breakout sessions went. So I'm going to pause. Jana, I see your hand is raised, and if there's any others that have feedback or want to add any comments.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Greg, I think you might need to mute yourself.
Yeah, I'm sitting at an airport as well, and so I have limited options. So we have had several conversations in the work groups that I've been part of, where we needed to recognize that portion, that I-5 is a major freight corridor. And I see in their comments about the considerations that we need to take for the bridge, and I don't see any reference to the economic impacts of the bridge and the necessity for that as a freight corridor.
Really good comment. We will add that.
Thank you.
And it has been shared in various sessions, so it's important for us to add. Thanks, Jana.
Thank you.
Other comments, thoughts? Did we miss anything? Okay. Not seeing other hands up. So if there is other information that you feel we need to share in this space or that we didn't cover, we are open to hearing what that is. Please reach out and let us know. We are not going, this is not the only time we're talking about transit. So our next meeting on the 14th, we will be spending a bit of time discussing transit again. So with that, I want to pivot us over to Hayden Island and Marine Drive. I also want to share that at our last meeting, we did have a couple of our partner agencies that were in attendance. They were part of those breakout sessions, which I think really added a lot of value to the dialogue. And so we have also invited our partners at the City of Portland to be a part of this conversation. So we have 2 members from the City of Portland that you may see if you are in one of their breakout sessions. And so it's Patrick Sweeney and Kevin Bond. So Patrick's on the screen and Kevin is on as well. So we just really feel like as a program, being able to bring our partners in, have them in those sessions with you, adds just a great amount of insight and background. And this particular presentation, being on Hayden Island and Marine Drive, seemed like they were a great partner to have in this session. So with that, we're going to start with a bit of a reflection on what we heard from the community relative to this topic of Hayden Island Marine Drive. And Nicole from our program team, our community engagement lead, is going to do the presentation. And then I think we'll go ahead and move into the details by our engineering team. So with that, Nicole, I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. So we are a little bit behind schedule. So for the sake of keeping us moving, I'm going to kind of go through this pretty quickly. So bear with me here. As you all know, we did a strong outreach push back in the fall to gather feedback on the community's preferences and priorities related to very broad design options. Right now, I'm just going to go through those results as they relate specifically to Hayden Island Marine Drive, since that's what we're here to talk about. So the biggest takeaway that we had from all of our engagement activities is the need to reduce traffic congestion on I-5. In the survey, participants were asked their top priority for accessing Hayden Island. And the most important factor across the board was not actually accessing the island, but reducing congestion on I-5 itself at Hayden Island. So you can see on the graph on the right a little bit there that the reduced traffic congestion on I-5 was by far the top priority. And that was followed by prioritizing safety and road improvements, and then by convenience of access to commerce on the island. As for accessing Hayden Island and Marine Drive itself, about a third of respondents from the overall survey, we had about 9,600 participants, and about a third of those respondents stated that they didn't have a preference with how to access the island. Those who did state that they had a preference, though, it was really markedly shift based on either Oregon or Washington residents. So based on where folks are coming from. Washington residents tended to state a preference for direct access from I-5, where Oregon residents preferred to access the island from Marine Drive and an arterial bridge. As the bridge is currently configured, little over 70% of respondents indicated that they never walk, bike, or roll over the bridge to access Hayden Island. That said, people who stated that they would walk, bike, or roll across the bridge, they placed a higher prioritization on the need for dedicated lanes and safety signals specifically for bicycles and pedestrians. That was quick. Okay, next slide. So what's important to note is that the information that we received from the survey specifically is quantitative data. And I think I mentioned the last time that I was with y'all that I love quantitative data. I like working on those numbers, but they never tell the whole story. And that is exceptionally true in discussions related to Hayden Island. While 70% of the survey respondents in the original, about 72% in the overall survey, which is where we're getting that quantitative data, they said they don't have a preference for accessing Hayden Island. For the folks who live and work or both on the island, they have very strong preferences and very deep felt priorities for how this bridge should relate to Hayden Island Marine Drive. So that's why we do qualitative data built into all of our outreach opportunities. So a little focus right here, we did have a community working group on Hayden Island Marine Drive. And what we really heard in that group was participants expressed concern about the long-term impacts to the community. And not just by the bridge itself of what it will look like in the end, but also freight movement and safety on the island. And then also, of course, what the impacts are going to be like during construction itself. So just something to keep in mind that we will certainly be working on that continued outreach as the program progresses. So design, they placed, like I said, a very high priority on safety and also of freight movement. And we did have a freight working group as well. That's also, that information is carried into this as well. When we talk about long-term impacts, we're talking long-term. We're not just talking about the next 20, 25 years. They really expressed a desire to understand traffic projections beyond 2045, so over 20 years out. And participants are strongly supportive of a full interchange design, but they want to see more specific designs as we move forward. And you're going to hear a lot today about a full and a partial interchange. And note that those options have evolved since our engagement period. So we don't necessarily have specific feedback on the exact options, but we can definitively say that participants were strongly opposed. And by strongly, I mean 92%, 93% or so are strongly opposed to a no interchange option. And lastly, just to kind of sum up a little bit when we talk about qualitative versus quantitative and the importance of really engaging these communities, I just want to, and I see that Tom has his hand raised, so I'll get to you in just 1 second, Tom, but you're who I'm talking about really to a large extent is you and your communities, is that in addition to this fall engagement period, we have continued to be doing neighborhood outreach with the communities that are going to be most impacted on Hayden Island, or the neighborhoods that are in North Portland adjacent to the bridge and to the island. So we've done multiple meetings already with those neighborhood associations. Sometimes we're presenting, sometimes we're listening to the presentations that they would like to share with us. And we're also doing that with the large commercial businesses as well. So those will continue. In fact, we just sent out some invitations this week to all of those neighborhood associations and the marinas and morages to make sure that we continue to sustain that engagement with those communities. So, Mr. Hickey, you have a question?
Well, you've answered it to a certain degree because the questions of equity regarding the residents of Hayden Island was my chief concern at this point. Slide 15 talks a lot about what people think about getting on and off the freeway without considering the distinction between whether they live on the island or don't. And seems to me that the whole point of looking at things through an equity lens is to prioritize the needs of the people who are most profoundly affected by the decision being made. So it was just basically concern that if 70% of the people don't care about what the exit is, that doesn't speak to the importance of what the exit decision is. It tends to sabotage the decision making to a certain degree by not distinguishing between whether these people are personally affected by the choice or not. So as you said in slide 16, you mitigated that to a degree, but it's not at all clear in terms of sort of the project documentation that equity lens has been applied. So that's my comment for the moment. I'm going to talk a lot today, by the way, but I'm done now.
And then Jana also has her hand up. So Jana.
Thank you, Tom. I think you make a good point, but we also have to consider that there's a lot of economic activity that happens on Hayden Island. And I can tell you, representing the freight community, how we access and on and off that island is very, very important. So we may not be residents of the island, but we are, our industry is very instrumental in terms of building that or contributing to that economic activity. So I think that was, I know that in the freight working group, we had a lot of discussion about it. And I think some of those comments were reflected in what was shared here a few minutes ago.
Thank you. Nicole, thank you for the information. Are there other questions? If not, we'll move into a deeper dive. And for that, I'd like to invite Brad Phillips and Casey Lyles, who are going to be talking about some design options with us. So, gentlemen.
Great, thanks, Lynn. And I think we have a presentation coming up. Good afternoon still, let's look at the time. My name is Casey Lyles, and I'm the design manager for the IBER program. For this section, I'll lead off. I have a brief introduction to the options development and the screening for the Marine Drive Hayden Island area of the program. I only have a couple of slides, and then Brad Phillips, our roadway lead, will show visuals and walk through the options and screening summary, including trade-offs. So our process has included identifying changes in the program area since 2013, including contextual and physical changes. We work with partners and communities to identify the design concepts that address those identified changes. We separated the developed concepts into 3 main categories, and those include a full interchange on Hayden Island, a partial interchange on Hayden Island, and no freeway interchange on Hayden Island. Please note that while these category names only refer to the Hayden Island interchange, the design options include improvements in the large complex of the interchanges that constitutes the local connectivity in Oregon between both Hayden Island and Marine Drive areas, both the local connectivity and the interchange interactions. So the list below shows 5 new options 1 through 5, that fit into these 3 categories of full, partial, and no interchange. Through detailed development, we learn more about the operational and safety concerns for the initial partial interchange concepts, those are 2 and 3, and developed an additional option, option 5, for that partial interchange that replaces those into the screening. I'll provide some more detail in a few slides on that progress, but just wanted you to note that options 1 and 5 there are shown in bold text, as well as the 2013 local preferred alternative. Also, option 4 is not bold, and I'll go through both of those. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the changes since 2013. As I mentioned, we identified through our partners in the community. Since 2013, we've had a regional transportation plan update. And working with our partners, we've identified that there's been increased off-ramp traffic volumes for the southbound Marine Drive exit. Had changes in business development in the area. The Port of Portland no longer is planning the terminal construction on the West Hayden Island. We have an increasing age of the North Portland Harbor Bridge and need to replace. In addition, we also have the levee system improvements along the south edge of North Portland Harbor and north-south under the interstate. With those changes, some of the assumptions that we're making within this program currently are that we need to replace the North Portland Harbor Bridge, that we need to have an auto access between North Portland and the Hayden Island, that we need to have the local and bicycle and pedestrian connections that include a shared use path, and then we need to have a high capacity transit station on Hayden Island. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, working through the further details of development of the concepts, option 5 was developed because as we looked at options 2 and 3, these are the partial interchange on Hayden Island, we discovered that there were operational and safety flaws, particularly concerning the I-5 southbound Marine Drive off-ramp. That's a loop ramp that goes up to the intersection in options 2 and 3. Because of those flaws, we discovered that options didn't meet the purpose and need. They created safety issues due to speed differentials on the interstate. With that said, we pivoted to option 5. We further developed so that it solved the traffic problem with options 2 and 3 by separating the traffic from the Hayden Island, from the Marine Drive interchange. So the traffic to and from the south side of Marine Drive or Hayden Island, we separated that from the traffic at Marine Drive. We still had an efficient Marine Drive interchange with the option 5. Next slide, please. And to give you a little bit more context as well, Brad will be showing a visual and walking through these options 1 and 5. So similar to options 2 and 3, because we had problems getting half of the traffic from the Hayden Island area into the Marine Drive interchange, now consider adding all of the Hayden Island traffic for the interchange into the Marine Drive interchange. We discovered that that amount of traffic was too substantial and created unsafe conditions due to speed differential with I-5. Therefore, option 4 was dismissed as it did not meet the purpose and need. We could not get all the traffic from the interchange into the Marine Drive interchange. With that, I think the next slide leads to Brad walking through the details of options 1 and 5. In addition, there is option 2013 shown in the comparison matrix, and that's just shown so that you can see a trade-off of comparisons through our screening process. So Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Casey. Good afternoon, everybody. I have quite a few slides in here, but given the amount of time, I'm going to try to concentrate on just a few of them. A lot of the details, there's just frankly too much on some of these slides to go through the details, really meant for all of you to be able to take away and study in a little bit more detail. So I'm going to concentrate on what do these two options look like, and then get into some comparisons. So option 1, this is a three-dimensional graphic that is representation of a similar 2D version of option 1 that has been on the table that you guys have seen in the past. In the near ground, is Marine Drive. The bottom of the page is Marine Drive. North is up. At the very top of the page is the main Columbia River. Right through the middle is what you're calling the North Portland Harbor, where a lot of the floating homes are located. So the option is at Marine Drive. is what we call a single point interchange. There's a signal right in the middle of Marine Drive where all of the ramps, both 2 of them to the north, 2 of them to the south, go through one signal. Those ramps connect directly to I-5 northbound and southbound. So all 4 directions of a typical interchange ramp on Marine Drive. Going to the north side on Hayden Island, there's a note that says full interchange on Hayden Island. Those are direct ramps as well, 2 for northbound, 2 for southbound. If you're to and from Washington, you would connect to North Jansen Street. If you're to or from the Oregon side, you would connect to North Hayden Island Drive. Tomahawk Island Drive connects underneath I-5. That is a street that's not there today, connecting right through the middle of the island underneath all of the infrastructure. On the west side of the infrastructure of the highway, there's a couple of colored lines in there. There's the transit, which is an connection between the existing yellow line and Expo Road going over the river connecting into Washington. There would be a transit station on Hayden Island. That line is represented, could be either light rail or bus rapid transit. There's a light, smallish purple line, and that is the shared use path. While on this drawing, it's shown on the west side, adjacent to the transit, connecting down to what's labeled as Pier 99 Street, which is where the 40-mile loop trail is, and would include improvements to the 40-mile loop, as well as connections towards Delta Park and up Expo Road to facilitate the shared use path connections towards Portland. Also next to transit in the shared use path is a West Arterial Bridge. That is a local road that would connect Expo Road and Pier 99 Street, extension of Vancouver Way. That is a arterial bridge that improves that connectivity between the North Portland neighborhoods and Hayden Island. Next slide is option 5. We call this the partial interchange. Much of the highway infrastructure is similar between these two. On Marine Drive, there's still the single point interchange, as you see. There's some other little curly ramps in there. You know, as you see, there's some of the complexity that's changed in here in comparison to that previous slide. And that is ramps that would serve Hayden Island. So rather than having the ramps from Oregon to Hayden Island actually on Hayden Island, they're occurring within and under Marine Drive. So there's a note kind of on the bottom right that says northbound off-ramp to Pier 99 Street / Hayden Island. So if you were going northbound, you would have exited off of I-5 like you were going to Marine Drive. However, before you get there, you merge off of that ramp into a ramp that goes under Marine Drive and connects down to Pier 99 Street. In the opposite direction, on the upper left-hand corner, it says southbound on-ramp from Pier 99 Street / Hayden Island. And similarly, that connects from Pier 99 Street underneath Marine Drive through a loop on the left side of the screen, merges with the Marine Drive ramp and continues south. This option includes an east arterial bridge, and that east arterial bridge loops around Vancouver Way, again, kind of on the right side of the screen, down onto Pier 99 Street. So it's that connection between Pier 99 Street and the East Arterial Bridge that makes the connection between Oregon and Hayden Island. And then on Hayden Island itself is where we call a partial interchange. On Hayden Island is only the connections directly to or from Washington, same locations previously as connecting to North Jansen Drive. Similarly, it includes Tomahawk Island Drive. Similarly, it includes transit on the west side. In this case, though, the shared use path is shown on the east side and would go across the East Arterial Bridge, connecting to 40 Mile Loop and on into Delta Park. It's a couple of questions that I assume are related to these two descriptions. So Tom, Gentry.
Yes, I want to bring this up before we go to breakout groups. My first concern is we've had 3 speakers already tell us that in the interest of time, we're going to shorten this. Well, I think this is pretty important. The second one is you continue to talk about Oregon and Hayden Island. Yes, I understand the geographic and political things, but Hayden Island identifies a lot with Vancouver also. And to think that there's a split there, I think is a bad assumption. And the last thing is I realize we have a limitation here of the 5 miles, but I do not see how you can come to a good solution without looking at Delta Park and all of those interchanges and convergences that are happening there. If you've driven that, and I'm sure you have, you know that traffic is backed up very, very far there. And I realize that you have that limitation, but I think that prevents us from having a good solution.
A couple of responses. As far as trying to speed through this, I think we want to get to breakout groups and we can continue these conversations in smaller groups. That's why I want to get this moving to get to those. As far as Oregon and Washington, I'm using those to help describe these options only. I clearly understand the relationship of Vancouver to Hayden Island, but I'm trying to use those as an easier geographic reference to directionality. Thirdly, I think you make a good point about Delta Park area, and the graphics shown here do not represent the entire project limits. This is really just trying to focus on those major differences between Marine Drive and Hayden Island. The project does extend further south to Victory. It extends further east out MLK. And there are some differences there that I didn't describe, but our analysis certainly is going further out than this graphic is showing. Tom Hickey.
Thank you. I have a few questions. The first one being, and this is not expressing a preference particularly, but what are the imperatives you consider when you look at whether the arterial bridge should be on the east side or the west side?
Functionality being one of those. For example, on this one, we started off looking at this being on the west side, but the functionality of that intersection where light rail is crossing Pier 99 Street and Expo Road, we felt made it extremely challenging to design all of those crossings and the activity happening because of the added transit going across that area.
I'll have to take your word for it, but I don't see at a glance why there should be any substantial difference at that particular junction, but no doubt you've dug into it deeper than I have. My second question is, in the other package of drawings you sent to us showing the Vancouver view, you included the stacked bridge option. And in the package that we're looking at from the Oregon point of view, the stacked bridge option is not on the table. Why is that?
It is on the table. The graphics are still in production and we don't have them available yet to share. Okay. But it is a very good point. The bridge shown here is shown as the two side by side, and the project is still considering the two versions over the Columbia River stacked as well as side by side. So thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that.
All right, thank you. That's all for now.
Casey, I saw you unmute. Was there any additional comment you wanted to make?
I was just going to add to Brad's description on that west side. If that arterial bridge was on the west side in this scenario, yeah, it was likely going to be very, very close to that ramp terminal in the south, getting on the freeway. So there is some complexity, both like Brad mentioned with the Hayden Island, or with the light rail, high capacity transit alignment coming through that area, as well as the ramp terminal. So that's part of that functionality discussion.
Can you toggle back and forth a couple of times like you just did? Okay. All right, thanks.
Yeah, that toggling is really helpful. Do it all the time. What the heck's the difference between these? Going to the next slides. These are the slides that I really don't want to spend a lot of time on, just because there's so much information. I can't do it justice in a couple of minutes. But to describe what you're looking at is, we took 3 options, the 2 you just saw, plus the 2013 design, and went through a pretty extensive screening process. And this is the summary of our screening. We've looked at close to 100 different elements, figured out trade-offs and benefits of each of them, compared them together, and tried to think of how they fared together and did a rating system. And that's what we call these Harvey balls, these circles with halves, quarters, fulls, to try to get to a big picture of what's the difference between all of these. All the text in the middle is our descriptions of why we think they're different. And again, as we were just doing, flipping back and forth, you almost need to print these out side by side and compare them one next to each other to really understand what the differences are. And that's the time that it takes to really understand these. And then there's the focus on equity and climate on the right side. So there's one of these for the 2013, and one for design option 1, and another for design option 5. Tom, do you have a question about the screening?
I do. And fairly brief, but looking at the freight question, and I want to make clear that Bridgeton very much wants to be a supporter of the freight community, because we live right in the middle of it. We have to be good neighbors. When you say that freight to and from the Marine Drive area operates acceptably with minimal delay through the interchange, what are your metrics on that? And does the freight community agree with you about its acceptability?
We've been doing, and Ryan's on the phone, our transportation specialist. We've been working with him on doing some intersection analysis, understanding what the volumes are, going through all of these different ramps and roadways. And the 2 options, 1 and 5 on Marine Drive, are nearly identical.
Yeah, no, I get that they're nearly identical. There was a long ago conversation about a flyover, which I have heard from the Columbia Corridor Business Association that they would like to see pushed as a need still. And so I'm concerned that having taken the flyover out of the conversation, I think actually back in the Columbia Crossing days, concerned that the business people and the freight people are going to find that it is not actually adequately, acceptably working for them. So, again, Bridgeton, we're just, I'm a resident. I don't have an opinion. I'm actually neutral on that question, but I want to hear from the freight industry that they're okay with this plan, so that we can know that our neighbors, our partners, are satisfied. So I'll let Janet.
Well, I appreciate the question, and I'm not sure I have the answer at this point in time today. I'm still trying to understand these schematics as they've been presented. So I think we have another freight advisory subcommittee group, if I'm correct. Am I correct in that? It seemed like there was something on my calendar here in the near future. In any event, I think we need to get some of those folks together and take a look at the details of this, because I appreciate the fact that you're concerned about our needs. And so are we having another meeting?
My real concern is that traffic flows smoothly through the intersection so that the residents aren't put out either. So we have
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
presented, I'm gonna jump in, Tom and Janet. This is Ryan, the Browse Transportation Planning Manager. We did present the results to the freight group on the operations of this and are meeting the performance standards by ODOT and City of Portland in the future and the 2045 time period with this option as well as the other option. So that's why we're saying it's meeting the standard and performing and operating acceptably.
Who did you present that to?
We presented it at the freight group last time. We briefly showed it and kind of had some high level factoids and have been we have that information, Janet. We can resend that to you if you need to see it again.
Well, I appreciate that. I chair that group and I don't recall the level of detail that we're talking about here. So I will take this offline and promise to give you all an answer on that as soon as I understand it better. So thank you.
Well, and Jana, I think there's probably multiple dynamics here because there's several stakeholder groups that we want to make sure that we're seeking feedback from. So I think Greg may have mentioned that this was on deck to be presented to the ESG. They didn't have enough time for it. So we are just now in this process of making sure the community advisory group sees it, the equity advisory group, all of those specific stakeholder groups. So I think gathering the insight and information from groups like this is where we are in the program right now. So this is the first time you're seeing some of those drawings and getting this presentation with some time for some comments and feedback. Casey?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. And I think the question was on target for if there was a flyover ramp that was previously looked at during the CRC timeframe. However, in this concept trade-off discussion, I don't think that would help us distinguish between the two options. It is not something that we've looked at between these two options, but if Ryan can just nod his head, but I don't think it should create a difference in trade-off between these two. As long as it could be built in either one of them, that's something that could be discussed later, although it isn't currently thought of as the current options do improve that interchange. That's what we've been analyzing to date.
I accept that. That's a fair comment.
Thanks, Tom and Casey. I think at this point, Brad, did we make it through all the slides?
Not really, but I mean, in the sense of time, like I say, I think it's more important to get to the breakout groups. You have technical people in each one of those. We can cover a little bit more in each one of those if we need to.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Really appreciate the presentation. What we intend to do, and the facilitators in each of the breakout sessions, we have access to the slides. We can share them if we need to. You have the slides that were emailed to you, so you could pull those up as well. We can follow back up again too. So if there are more questions that we don't have enough time for, we certainly don't want to cut our time short. Let's do a follow-up conversation, small group meeting, whatever we need to do. But at this point, I would like to pivot us over to the breakout sessions. And as Brad mentioned, we have a technical expertise in each of those sessions. So there'll be someone that'll take notes. You may have one of the members of the City of Portland that's in your group, and then we'll also have our technical experts in the groups as well. So with that, we will have about, Jason, what do you think, 20 minutes? 15?
I think 20 minutes, 20 minutes will be good. Yep.
All right, so let's do that. Please plan to have someone come back and be able to provide a quick summary of what was discussed in the meeting before we head into public comment. So think you're all familiar with the way in which breakout sessions happen. We'll just move to our small groups and ask for feedback and pull up any slides that you might need to see. So with that, Jason, I think we're ready to roll. Okay, looks like we're all back. Lynn, do you want to kind of go around to each of the groups to share a bit and debrief?
I can. How many groups did we have in total? 4.
4.
Good news is I can count fingers, so moving right along. Great. I don't know if we knew what our group number was, but if I could get a volunteer to share out their group sentiments, that would be helpful.
Lynn, I can start sharing from our group unless someone from the committee wants to do that. Tom or others?
Take it and we'll chime in if there's something we want to emphasize. Thank you, Audrey.
Okay, perfect. One of the key takeaways that was shared in our group is that it didn't seem like there was much of a difference between the two options in terms of most of the community values, except for on the equity value and the footprint is really the biggest difference between the two options and how that affects the community on Hayden Island. There was also a desire to have some more time to digest this information. There's quite a bit of information in these images and in the charts, and this group, needs a little bit more time and would like to share specifically. Someone in our group would like to take this information and share it with the freight community and those that they serve related to freight and get their feedback on the two options. And so we'll be making a commitment to take this information out to that community and come back to the CAG and to the program with feedback specifically on these two options from the freight community. There was a request for more data. So specifically to understand travel time differences and congestion differences in terms of the two options and whether one option made for a quicker trip through the area or to Hayden Island or to and from Marine Drive. And I think that about sums it up. We definitely could have used a couple more minutes because we didn't get around to everyone. So
thank you. If I could get another group volunteer, I suspect there may be some overlapping themes. Sarah, I see your hand. Take it away.
All right, if we could get the notes on the board here.
Absolutely. Who was your facilitator?
It's group 4.
Thank you, Alex.
Awesome, thank you. So we talked a lot about option 5, and I think that was kind of one of our more preferred, or the more preferred of the two. There was a lot of discussion on freight capacity, commerce. I'll just go ahead and read the green one. Option 5 seems to reflect our values best. Assuming that this is the most current data, like someone pointed out previously, there's a lot of data to digest in these slides. We still need to refine, design, and gather more data. I guess maybe we're still waiting on a little bit more information on option 5. And then freight congestion relief, data-driven decision-making, those are definitely important for us. The freight community on the Washington side was looking for more data to support freight and traffic volumes and modeling for different scenarios. We also talked a little bit about the environmental impact and the impact to the community, to the floating bridges or the floating homes, as well as the real property, the businesses that are there. So one was obviously less impactful than the other, at least according to the call out buttons. So option 5 seems to be our preferred.
Sarah, can I ask, Andrew Hone was on the call and we lost him for a little while, and I think he had something he was going to add. Andrew, if you can hear us, is there anything you'd want to add to this summary?
Sounds like he's still busy with spring breakers.
Right.
Kids running around.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, thank you. Oh, wow, great anticipation. We've got 2 more groups, so looking for at least 1 more volunteer now. I'm checking the other screen.
I can give it a shot for my group. I'm a terrible summarizer, but I'll do my best.
No, Jasmine, I've heard you speak. You do a great job. You're selling yourself short.
So we kicked it off by just talking about the information that we may not be the best equipped, or the information we may need to be even better equipped. And that's really leaning into our trucking and freight folks. And so as kind of it's kind of been spoken by other groups, but really leaning into that and saying that we want to hear more of their perspective, while also realizing that there might be some unexpected impact, like that things like tolls and whatnot might have on how they use the bridge. So trying to just get an overall good picture and understanding of how freight interacts with all of this, so we can also make a decision that best impacts them, while also ensuring that making a decision based off of their need is also appropriate. So that's one piece. We also then, it was really great because we had some very personalized experiences brought up in the group. So one being of how someone that lives in the Kent area interacts with Hayden Island in general, and looking at the way the on-ramps and whatnot interact with them, and seeing that benefit of that kind of straight line shot that could be offered to folks in that area right into Hayden Island. So that was another really great point. Some other pieces were just like some general understanding of how the, I will take ownership for this, of how the Curly Bridge interacts and is a little bit different from the other bridge, and just getting some firmer understanding of how those different on-ramps will impact traffic. And it was nice to get a little bit of a clearer understanding on just how, specifically with option 5, that's the formal title, how option 5 does a really great job in both examples, do a really great job of really separating the traffic out to keep folks that are coming from certain areas on certain places, so it's not everybody coming in at once. Another piece that we talked about was how our bicyclists and pedestrians and our rollers and things of that folks of that community are going to be interacting with the bridge, and just really understanding that how really both options, I think I'm just going to go with both options. I can't remember what's the specific one, but either way, they provide quite a bit of relief from the terrifying option that exists right now. And we're looking at Marine Drive and just kind of the fear of that piece. And there is one more point, and oh my goodness, they talk about you either forget the first thing or the last thing. And in this scenario, I forgot the last thing. So if anyone wants to pick up, I do apologize. I think it was probably a great point. I just can't recall it right now.
Does anyone from Jasmine's group want to step up?
I think you hit it all, so.
Awesome. Well, then that's my group. That's our report out.
You did a great job, Jasmine. Thank you so much for stepping forward. And then we have one final group. Do we have a volunteer to report out? I'm going to default. Oh, Jason.
That was me, but certainly happy to have anybody from our group. Ed, your hand is up. Would you like to take it away? No, you're on mute right now, Ed.
Jason, I didn't have my hand up to make any comments. I'm just much more concerned about hearing from the members of the group. But I had my hand up to ask that when the groups present, if they could at least just let us know what group you were from. I think that's important because it was a lot of good information was shared, and I just don't want us to lose the spirit of it. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ed. My group had Casey from the program and Lauren as a note taker, along with Dina and Tom Gentry and Ed and Whitney and Ryan. I think consisted of our group, but very much similar to what we've heard, that in this presentation was a lot of information and maybe not quite enough data to really make an informed decision on how these relate to our values and priorities. We know that some of our top priorities and values are cost effectiveness and congestion relief, and we didn't quite have enough of the data to really weigh it against those. And so really a desire to really spend more time with this and to see a little bit more data. We also had some great comments around the footprint of the bridge, both along the banks as well as in the river, and just again weighing relating to one and two of our 12 values, but keeping cultural history and our natural resources intact, and paying attention to that, and really being sensitive to those issues. And then again, related to, the program is trying to find a fine balance of not being inundating with too detailed that only an engineer or transportation professional can read it, but enough detail that everybody can read. But these static images are tough to read. And so how can we find maybe a little bit more user-friendly that really shows how one option might impact traffic better than the next? So those, and then we also talked about freight movement as well. And so those are kind of the big key themes that we talked about, but we're happy to have anybody weigh in as well. Casey, thank you for answering the questions. If there was anything more detailed that you could describe better, we'd be happy to hear that as well.
I would just say that the team did heavily look at the kind of trade-offs and the comparison of the consumer report balls, and looked at that kind of and said, well, it looks like it performs better on a whole in one way, which in that trade-off comparison looks like option 5 performs a little bit better. So that's part of what I heard.
Yeah.
Thank you. A lot of similarities and some differences with the group. So some common themes that I think we would all agree to. With that, Lisa, I think you have some wrap up, what's next, and then public comments. So.
Thanks, Lynn. Sounds like we have someone signed up for public comment, Brent, correct? Yes. Okay, so let's do what's next and the list of program meetings, and then I will open up the public comment. So we are meeting April 14th, April 28th, big meetings. April's a lot of information and time that we're looking to get your feedback on some pretty important elements of how the program's moving forward. So final transit investment options, auxiliary lanes, and the draft modified locally preferred alternative discussion. We are, as we mentioned earlier, looking for a little extra time with breaks built into our community advisory group meetings. Jason will be sending out some information. We're looking for you to respond as soon as you can so that we can try and update those calendar notices. So be expecting an email from Jason tomorrow. We have dates on the calendar already set for several of these groups. So as you can see, the equity advisory group's being asked to meet twice this month. They meet on April 4th and April 18th. The executive steering group is being asked to meet twice this month. So April 7th and April 21st. And then our community advisory group on the 14th and the 28th. I would recommend, if you have a little time, you can access these public meetings on YouTube. You can put them on and take a walk outside, but it is good to hear kind of the conversation that happens in these other groups as much as We have Lynn and Ed that are able to take the message back to the executive steering group meeting, and Johnell and Jake that are able to take information back and forth to the equity advisory group. It would be good to just be able to listen in if you have a few extra minutes to some of the commentary around the same topics that you're looking at and we're asking for your feedback on. All right, let's move into public comment. So this is the time where if the community has input that they'd like to share with our community advisory group, we ask that you call in at 1-669-900-6833. Our meeting ID is 993-5459-6043. Passcode is 674942. Go ahead and dial *9 to raise your hand. I'll call on participants to provide comments, *6 to unmute yourself, and please provide your name and affiliation. We have a few minutes to be able to take your comments. We'd like to monitor those for about 2 minutes. So with that, I think Jason will go ahead and make sure that we're watching the clock. I do see that we do have one member of the community, last 4 digits, 8095. Please go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, your affiliation, and share your comments.
Yes, hello, this is Dan Packard. Had a heck of a time getting phoned in here, but I think you can hear me. I have a comment about the options there. I saw those earlier. The footprint looks massive. It looks like there will be like an additional 7-8 lanes of concrete. And that concerns me with the climate impact. And also, will this displace any existing businesses on Hayden Island? I want to find out if I was looking at option 5, and it says the active transportation component of it has a more direct north-south route with the shared use path. But it looks like once you get over to the Marine Drive area, then you have to go towards the west Expo Center to continue south. And that's quite a detour. That's much more of a detour than there is right now. And I'd like to find out if the drawings, the 5 different options, are available online at interstatebridge.org.
Thank you, Dan. Any other comments that you want to make?
Yeah, are those options available to see online?
They will be online if they're not already as part of this particular meeting. And we can make sure to send the link to you. They would be under the Community Advisory Group meeting materials.
Okay, and if there'd be some way to make it easier for the public to chime in here, like via Zoom, because right now I'm on a huge long delay over the telephone and it was really difficult to get in the first place. It'd just be nice to make that accommodation a lot easier for the public.
I appreciate that comment. It's a lot of numbers to be reading out. That makes it challenging for folks to call in. We'll have a conversation about if there's an easier way for us to provide access. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate your feedback. Any other public comments, Brent?
No one else has signed up at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. I think that it is time for our co-chair, Ed Washington. I can't find him on my screen. There you are, right next to me. Ed, to
Yes.
close us on out and provide some final words.
Well, I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule today and to be such active participants. I'd like to also thank not mine, but the co-chair, Lynn Valenter, for the good work that she always does on these committees. And I think that this evening for me has been a real eye-opener. And I know that Lynn and I and Jason will talk about this. we're sort of getting to the point where the rubber is really beginning to meet the road. And so I just want to encourage every member of the CAG that this is your opportunity. You are a member of the Citizen Advisory Group, and this is your opportunity to speak out about the issues. And I know sometimes some of you may feel like maybe you won't be heard, but this is your opportunity. So I just want you guys to jump right in. The water is good because we want to hear from you, and we need your input. And don't be shy, okay? None of us may get everything we want, but all of us will get something of what we want on this project. So I thank you so very, very much for your input and those who really participated this evening. But I'm encouraging all the rest of you. You're part of this committee. Your voices are welcome and they need to be heard. So otherwise, have a wonderful evening. I'm going to spend a couple more days up here in the San Juan Islands and see you all when I get back. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.